In the last session, we have understood how to work with Object Initializer, and we have observed the features of object-oriented programming theoretically. From this session, we shall understand how to implement object-oriented programming using various features supported by C#. To get started with, let us understand the concept of properties. So, what are properties? Means it is used to set or get the values from the private or protected members of the class. And the syntax to define a property will be syntax, public data type property name, and a property usually will have two blocks. One is a setter and the other one is getter. To define, we need to type in set, we need to open the braces, variable equal to value. And to define the getter, we need to type in getter, open the braces, and return variable. Now, let us understand some of the important points to remember about the properties. A property can be read-only, write-only, or read and write property. In order to define a read-only property, then getBlock should be used. And in order to define a write-only property, setBlock should be used. The value in the above syntax is a keyword which is used to maintain the value provided by the user at the runtime. Now, let us understand with a simple demo how to use properties, and let us understand how to practically implement data abstraction and encapsulation. So, for example, let us assume that we wanted to define a class with the name product. And whenever we say product, I would like to maintain the details about product ID, product name, and the price. And always it is advisable that whenever we define any variable within the class, make sure it is defined as a private. And whenever we define a member as a private, it is always advisable to define the member using underscore, so that on seeing the variable itself, we can understand that this variable is a private variable. Since we would like to initialize the members of the product class, we need to define a constructor which accepts the details of product ID, product name, and the price, so that the constructor will initialize the members of product class. We know that a private member can't be accessed outside of the class. So in order to provide the efficient access to the members, we need to take the support of properties, right? But remember that depending upon the requirement, the need will change. Now, say that as per my requirement, product ID, product name should not be changed. For example, if the product name is LG GoldenEye TV, I should not change the product name as Shaker Diamond Eye TV. But assume that the price is not fixed. Then we need to define the product ID and product name as read-only properties. And since the price will be changing, we need to define that as a read and write property. In case if the requirement is, if the price is fixed price, then we might have defined that property also as a read-only property. Now, based on this requirement, let us build our demo. So let me add a new class file and let me provide the name for the class as data abstraction and data encapsulation demo using properties. A very big name. Now, let me remove the unwanted using statements and let me cut the class name and add as a subnamespace name. Now, let us define the class product. So, let me type in class product and we require the product ID. So, let me type in private string underscore product ID and then let us define the read-only property. So, let me type in public string product ID get return this dot product ID. We can observe that for underscore product ID, there is a lock symbol, which means we cannot access that member. And for the property, we can observe there is a tool symbol, which means product ID is a property. In the same way, let me define the product name also. So let me type in private string underscore product name, public string product name. Since we need this property also as read only, we need to define only the get block. So let me type in get return this dot underscore product name. And finally, we need the price. So let me type in private decimal underscore price. And the price we would like to access. So we need to define read and write property. So let me type in public decimal price get of this dot underscore price equal to value get of return this dot price. Now we have the definition for the product class. Now let us try to use the product class. So let me define another class, for example demo, and let me add an entry point. Now let me first define an instance for the product class. So let me type in product TV equal to new product of TV 101 comma LG Golden Eye 18,500. Now let us observe, can we modify the name of the product? So let me type in TV.product name equal to Shaker Diamond Eye. We can observe an error because the product name is read only. Now let us try to update the product price. So let me type in TV.price equal to 9,500. We can observe there is no error because the price is a read and write property. Now let us display the product details. So let me type in console.writeLine of product ID colon placeholder of 0 slash n product name colon placeholder of 1 slash n price colon placeholder of 2, and let us pass the values for it, that is tv.product ID comma tv.product name comma tv.price. Now let us set this class as the startup object and let me execute the program. We can observe that the product details are displayed successfully. Just remember that the data abstraction and data encapsulation, these two concepts works together. So remember that identify what data you wanted to expose and what data you wanted to hide is considered as data abstraction. And in order to achieve that, we might use some modifiers, class, structures, properties, methods, etc., which is said to be data encapsulation. So in our example, we can observe that the product ID and product name we are not allowing to be modified, and we are allowing only price to be updated. Hope you have got a fair idea on what is data abstraction and data encapsulation, and also how to use the properties. Before we go for the next feature, let us understand one more important concept. Hi friends, hope you are enjoying my videos. If you like my video, please subscribe my channel and click on the bell icon to get the notifications of all my latest videos. Friends, many students are asking me where can we find your courses and how to get my courses for the best price. Friends, if you are already a Pluralsight subscriber and wanted to upgrade your skills towards Java stack such as JDBC, Servlets, JSP, and Spring MVC with Hibernate through my courses, please check out the links present at the description on this video. Many students are requesting me to provide trainings on various technologies, which I couldn't able to fulfill all these days. Now, here is the good news. You can learn from me at the most affordable price, $5 to $10 for each course, which means now you can upgrade your skills to the latest technologies at the price lesser than watching a movie. You can find my courses at Udemy and also in our website technoacademy.net. The best price of my course at Udemy you can find using the link provided at the description of this video. And also you can find the price I'm offering at my website technoacademy.net. Wherever the price you feel lesser, subscribe my course from that website. Happy programming, yours Shekhar. If you recollect, I have informed that whenever we are going to define a variable within the class, I said that it is always advisable to define that variable as a private variable, and to access that variable outside we need to use the properties as per the requirement. We might have defined the property as a read only, write only, or read and write property. Right. Now, while defining the property, while assigning the value, if there is a condition check and if we raise an exception, then following the above rules is advisable. But when we have a requirement such that we wanted to set or get the value without any condition, then if we follow the rules, let us observe how the code will be. So let us add a new file and let me provide the name as property limitation demo. Now let me remove all unwanted using statements and let us say I wanted to define a class to maintain the details of first name and last name by following the rules. So let me type in class name and then private string underscore first name, and we need to have a property to access the name. So I need to type in public string first name, set this dot underscore first name equal to value, and get return this dot underscore first name. Similarly, I would like to define the last name. So let me type in private string underscore last name, public string last name, set this dot underscore last name equal to value, and get return this dot last name. So this is how we define the class name if we follow the rules. And if I don't follow the rules, let us observe how do we define the class name. So let me type in class name, public string, first name, comma, last name. Now, if you try to compare both the codes, the first one here is the code where I'm not following the rules, and the second one is the code where we are following the rules. So many developers were not happy with this, because if I was doing some kind of validation within the set block of the property, like verifying if the provided values is a valid alphabet or not, because name cannot contain numeric or special characters, then writing the full property definition is acceptable. But if we are defining the read-only property only to set and get the value without any validations or condition checks, then developers were not happy to follow this guidelines, because we don't find much difference between both the codes, because in one we access the variables directly and the other code allows to access the variables using the properties without any checks. So almost both are performing the same. In simple non-technical terms, if we need to understand, assume that we are in some roadside building and we need to go to office which is opposite side of this road, and we need to just cross the road to reach the office building. But if the traffic people says that directly crossing the road is going to create traffic jams, so you need to go 10 kilometers and then make a U-turn and again come back 10 kilometers and reach the office building, so that we can avoid traffic. So how many people will be interested in following that rule? Not many, right? Even if I wanted to follow the rules, I will be planning to break the rules. Now, so instead of 10 kilometers, if there was a provision like after 100 meters, if there is a U-turn, then I don't find much problem in that, and I will be happily ready to follow the traffic rules, right? In the same way, technically speaking, just for the sake of following object-oriented programming features, increasing the number of lines of code which doesn't help in any security aspects, many developers were not happy and they have started breaking the rules. And hence Microsoft understood from the feedback of developers And to reduce the complexity, they have introduced a new feature which is called as automated properties or auto implicit properties or automatic properties. If someone says implicit properties or automated or automatic properties, then assume that they are referencing the same concept only. And what is this feature means? In simple terms, it is used to define a read-write property. And the syntax is public data type property name set and get. Now, let me first complete the previous example. So let me add an entry point and let me define an instance for the named class. So let me type in name equal to name of first name equal to Shekhar, comma last name equal to Srinivasan. I have used an object initializer to initialize the members of the class. And let me display the data also. So let me type in console.writeLine of name colon placeholder of 0, placeholder of 1, comma name.firstname, comma name.last name. Let me set the startup object and let me execute the code. An error. Process is terminated due to Stack Overflow exception. Okay, let me check out once again. A small mistake. The last name property has been set, not the underscore last name variable. Okay, let me update the code once again. Let me execute the program. We can observe the result name colon Shekhar Srinivasan. Now, let us try to rewrite the above code using auto implicit properties. So let me add a new class file and let me provide the name as auto implicit properties demo. And let me cut the name and use as the subname space. Now let us define the class name. So let me type in class name and let me type in public string first name set and get and public string last name set and get. Now just remember that this class name and the code what I have written in the previous program both are same. So this code I can consider that instead of 10 kilometer a U-turn, it is like 100 meters a U-turn has been provided for us. So now the developers are happy with this feature so that whenever we need to define a read-write property, instead of using a full property definition, we can use this feature and still we will be following the rules of object-oriented programming. Just remember that this feature what it will do is internally they will create a backing private field and define methods to set or get the value from the backing field. Now let us first complete this program. So let me add an entry point and now let me define an instance for the class name. So let me type in name equal to new name, first name equal to Shekhar, last name equal to Srinivasan. And also let us display that data. So let me write a console.writeLine name colon placeholder of 0, placeholder of 1, comma name.firstname and name.last name. Now let us set this class as the startup object and let us execute the program. We can observe the same result name colon Shekhar Srinivasan has been displayed. Now we might get a doubt that if I write the class name using two public strings, that will also show the same result, right? So how do I accept that the last two programs are internally same? So let us observe that also in detail practically. So let me open the .NET command prompt and let me move on to our folder DNet 399 batch and let us verify if there is any exe file are there. No, we don't have any exe files. Okay, let me create a new program. So let me type in start notepad p1.cs and let me copy the code from the first program. And let me paste the code and let me save and quit the notepad. Let us compile our program csc p1.cs. And now let me create another program. So let me type in start notepad p2.cs and let me copy the code from the second program and let me paste the code and quit the notepad. Let me type in p1. We can observe the result as name colon Shekhar Srinivasan and then let me execute the second program p2. we can observe the same result, that is name colon Shekhar Srinivasan. Now let us understand how internally the code will be managed. So let us disassemble and check out. So let me type in start p1.exe. We need to use the ILDASM, which is intermediate language disassembler tool. So let me type in ILDASM. Similarly, let us disassemble the p2.exe also. Now let us place both the windows side by side. Our concentration is mainly on the class name. So let us first observe the name class of p1.exe. We can observe the two private variables underscore first name and the underscore last name. And since we haven't defined any constructor for the class, we have a default constructor, and then we have two properties, first name and the last name. And if you observe, these two properties have created four methods. Two methods to set the values for the first name and last name, and two methods to read the values from the first name and last name. Now let us observe what is the code that got generated for our p2.exe. If you remember, we have just defined only two automated properties within the class name, right? So let me expand the class. We can observe the two properties what we have defined, that is first name and last name. Along with that details, we can find some more additional members got generated by the system. We can observe two backing fields, one to maintain the value of the first name and the other to maintain the values of the last name. And then we can observe a default constructor and also the four methods which got generated to set and get the values of the properties. Now if you observe both the codes, after compilation remains the same only. The difference is we are not manually writing the lines of code. Here the code is getting generated automatically. Now just remember that whenever we have a requirement to set the value after a condition check or verification, then you need to use the full property definitions. And if it is just to simply set and get the value, and if you need to follow the object oriented programming principles, then you can use automated properties. Hope you have got a fair idea on how to implement data abstraction and data encapsulation, and also hope you have understood how to use properties and implicit properties. In the next session, we shall discuss about the methods in C#. See you in the next session.